Hey everyone. So this video is a continuation of the previous video on integrating audio into Unity, specifically how to use that in a VR setting using the XR interaction toolkit. So if you watched the previous one, we talked about bringing in audio, how to import it, and then really all we got to was getting audio attached to this interactable cube and having that set to play on Awake and then be a 3D sound source so that you could hear it in a sort of like quasi-spatialized manner in your VR experience. For many of you, that's probably where it's going to end, and that's okay. Like maybe that's what you want to do. You just want to be able to walk up to something and have it play, right? And I'll show you how to do that today. If, however, you want to get more, in depth with your audio, more specific, say you want to have audio occlude, so like maybe it goes behind something and you can't hear it, or it's muffled and you get filtering and stuff like that. I do still plan on doing a more in-depth video for that. This is taking time, so I'll get that out and we can talk about that individually as well. Today, what I want to show you is just extending from what we have, which is the sort of sound that plays on the cube when you hit play and it's just looping, and we were able to throw that around. I actually want to stop that. We actually don't, right? In a lot of senses, want our music to just start playing, right? Or sounds to play when you start your game. You want to be able to trigger it. You want to be able to do something like to cause that to happen, right? So let's talk through that logic. And then we're also going to talk through having just what I was referring to as non-diegetic music. So just music, right? Playing in the background or sound effects or ambience or something like that. So in order to get access to this, right, this grabbable, right, we can grab it with our controllers. But then to get access to the audio, what do you like? How do we do that? Like, what do we do, right? In the XR kit, you actually can do that on here, right? You could do it through if you're interacting with sort of any type of objects, like whenever you hover over anything, you can have something happen. So say we wanted to have like a little ding chime sound play whenever we hover over literally any interactable in the scene. We could do that and we could attach it here. Or we could have something happen when we specifically hover over this one. And that is what I'm going to show you here. Though you may want to extend this and think like, okay, whenever any object is selected that you can interact with, you hear like a little chime or something like that. If you've watched other videos where we talked about the interactors and all these listeners and that kind of concept, this will be a review. If not, just a real fast and dirty explanation. If you click on Interactable Events, these are different functions that Unity has given us. They're blocks of code that interact with the engine in some capacity, and they're checking if we want to put some sort of functionality in here. They're checking if this thing is happening, and if it is, then it does what we tell it to do. So first hover, last hover, hover entered, hover exited. Hover entered, right? It's just like you hover your controller over something or you place your hand over something. What happens when you begin to hover? What happens when you leave hovering? Selecting is actually grabbing the object. So the default with the kit is the grip, and select exit is dropping. What do you want to have happen? Select activated rather here is activated is when you grab something and then you use it. You press a button. So this would, like the easiest way to think about this is like shooting a gun or like a laser or something. The actual activation right here, for like a laser or something, you would want to shoot the laser, right? And this is where you would actually tell the engine to do that. For us, let's just say, we've got this cube here, and when we grab it, let's just have something happen. So that would be select entered. This is when we actually go over it, not when we're hovering, but when we actually interact with it. Grab it, we want to have something happen. And the thing I want to have happen, this is totally arbitrary, right, is I want to have the audio sources attached to it. This is what we were using last week. Instead of having that play on awake is like to start looping, right? Let's just have that play. So it's as simple as this. We say, well, okay, on select entered. So when that happens, we want to what? Well, it's looking for something here, right? Let's give it this. We're going to give it the cube. Another way to do that is on select entered, drag the cube in. And you could literally drag any object in. You're just looking for something, right? And what's interesting then is you have this thing that says no function and then a dropdown. Every object is going to have different things that are in the dropdown here. And what these are Unity getting access to these different components. And you're able to with these listeners, and this is what's so cool about the kit and what makes it so powerful. You're able to get access to those different components and the different functionality that they give you. So this is where you don't have to code at all, actually. And you could say, cool, I've got this cube and it's got an audio source on it. So I want to do something with the audio source. Okay, audio source. And then it gives you all this nonsense, right? So there's a lot of stuff here. A lot of it you can ignore because obviously there's a lot of functionality you're not going to need. But some things that are really interesting, right? Audio clip. So it's saying you can get access to the concept of the clip. So we could assign a different audio clip when we do something. We could go back here. Bool enabled, we could turn it on or off. We could shut the audio source off. We could make it loop or not loop. We could make it mute or not mute. You could change the pitch because that's a float. That's a floating number. You could slide the pitch up and down. You could play or pause or stop, which is probably pretty likely that you're going to want to do that, right? Pause, play, stop are the most likely things you're going to do, right? And for us, we do want to do that, right? We want to play. Or at least I want to play. I'm not sure what you were thinking in your head. So on select entered, when I go over and I grab that, right, it's going to start playing this audio source. Okay, and since I have it set to loop, it's just going to start looping this audio source. However, I don't have anything anywhere in the code right now or in the engine that's going to tell it to stop, right? It's just going to start going forever. So let's actually put that logic in. Let's say, okay, on select entered, we're going to have it start playing and then exited. So this is when you drop it, right? Let's have that do the opposite logic. Let's just drag in our object and go down and grab the audio source and have stop happen. And that's it. Pick up the object, start playing, drop the object, stop playing. If you look through these, I encourage you to just go play around with this stuff. This is something I wish I knew I wish I was encouraged to do this more when I first started learning Unity and VR and all this stuff, because there's so much power in here. One of the things I use all the time is just set active bool, which means you can do game object, which is getting the cube, not the audio source, but like the actual object, the cube, and just game object dot set active. And you could say, cool. So when we select it, we grab it, it'll turn the audio source on. And when we drop it, this cube will disappear. It's going to not be active. It's going to be deactivated. And what that essentially does is in the hierarchy, it'll do this. It'll just disappear, which, if you could imagine, solves our problem, right? It will stop playing because the cube will disappear. It's not destroyed, it's not gone, but it'll stop playing. The downside is we won't be able to grab it anymore, right? But there are other things you could do. You could do like the mesh renderer, right? So this is the thing that's making it look like a cube, the sort of element, the visual element. You could turn that off instead. So check this out, right? Instead of turning the cube off, we could just make it so the cube is invisible, which is kind of cool because then it would keep playing, but the cube would be invisible. And you can see some real like logical sort of applications of this, right? Where you want to have something still there doing something in your scene, but you don't want to see it anymore. This could be like menus, right? If you imagine you're going through a menu system and you click on something and you want to go to the next page, well, you just like hide the page you were on and turn on another page or something like that, right? That's kind of the logic for that. But anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent, just saying like go and play with these things and see if there's something interesting that you want to try, like the rigid body here, right? You can get the float, the drag. So on select exit, you could change the mass or you could change whatever. A lot of this presupposes a bit of knowledge of coding, and if you want or need explanation in that, just let me know. Like I'm happy to walk you through these things that we're kind of blazing through or like glazing over in class. But that doesn't mean I don't want you to know. It's just like I'm happy to explain it. It's just not necessarily applicable, right, all the time. All right, so anyways, long tangent. I just want to stop. So we play, when we pick it up, it stops, when we drop it. Cool. Let's see if my quest is hooked up. We hooked up. Sweet. All right, let me hit play and hopefully this won't crash. Cool. All right. Nice. It's awesome, right? So that's super easy, right? And again, for I think a lot of the functionality for things that audio interaction that people want to have in VR, it's not much more complicated than that. It's using maybe different these different listeners. So maybe it's not like on select entered, maybe it's hover, right? When you just hover over it, you have like a kind of sound that's very positive and lets the user know that they did the right thing, right? That could be here, right, instead of here. But it's very, very similar in functionality. The other thing I wanted to show was the idea of, we have this 3D interactive audio that's in here, but how about two-dimensional just music, right? Say you just want to have music playing, in your scene. Really easy. So the way I like to do it is in your hierarchy, you want to make an empty game object, and we want to call this, and again, I'm just going to zero it out and put it at 0 just to make things organized. We're going to call this just music, like that. And now it does nothing, right? This is just the concept of a transform at this point. But we want to add component, and let's add an audio source to this. So this is same thing we were doing in the previous video, right? Where we were talking about, just putting audio sources in and what they look like and all these different things. However, a couple of key differences here. If this is music for like your level or your ambience, wind sounds, whatever, you probably want it to play on awake. You probably want it to start when the game starts. And you probably want it to loop, probably. Again, this is not gospel or anything, but likely you want it to loop. The other thing that's obviously different than what we were doing here is you don't want it to be 3D, which means you don't want it to play from this position in the game. You don't want the music to emanate from the position of 0, 0, 0. You want it to come out of your speakers as a stereo, like stereo music, just like playing, kind of immersing you in the environment. Okay. So that means that's it. We just set it up. It's two-dimensional, plays on awake, and it loops. All we need to do is associate it with some sort of music clip. And I went and downloaded these. This is just Action RPG Music 1.6 from the Asset Store. But again, assuming like you have music that you want to use, or you write music or whatever, right? Be really creative. I'm gonna grab one of these. This was okay. This is like not the best music in the world, but it'll work for us. This is background something 03 Prairie. It kind of sounds like ambiguous JRPG wandering music. Something that I'm noticing, at least listening to it, is it's kind of loud. And you can change that here if you want to trim that down. So I'm going to trim this pretty significantly, because it's background, right? I don't want this to be the thing you hear, right? It's just kind of there in the background. You can also do all this routing through a mixer, and I'll do this. We'll talk about this in the more advanced one. There's like the next video in the series. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, where we talk about spatialization. But you don't need to do that. You can just control the volume here, kind of key it in where you want it, and let it go. And that's it. Now we'll have background music kind of playing. And then still, when I grab this thing, it's going to do the obnoxious kind of looping boing, boing, boing sound. But let's see how that works. Nice. Sweet. It's like kind of shocking. And I'm hoping this is coming through okay on Zoom. If it's not, I apologize. You're not getting anything. It's kind of shocking how fast music will transform your experience. So if you haven't put music in yet, I encourage you to just put some temporary music in. Just go to the asset store, type in music and then click the free button and go just find something. Um, because it makes it a lot more pleasant. It just kind of makes you more believable when you have a little bit of haptic feedback, a little bit of audio feedback from manipulating an object. It goes a long way to sort of transforming it into an environment that you can imagine spending more time in interacting and stuff. That's it, right? It doesn't get a whole lot more complicated than that in the basic sense, right? Obviously, there's tons of finesse here, right, that you can play with. You know, for example, if you remember listening to that, if you could hear the nuance, it was like boing, 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 and I dropped it and it went boing, and I was getting a click sound. If you know about audio, we're getting a clip because there's distortion, digital distortion when I was stopping the audio really fast, and you get this like kind of sound, right? And that's not great, right? So how do we get around that? Well, that's like a little bit of nuance, right? We can try to iron that out if we want to. Obviously, like maybe you want to play like random sounds or something. Those are all like possible, but it involves maybe a little bit of code or like just a different way of conceptualizing what these things do. None of it's like super complicated. It's just extending this concept a little bit further to do whatever it is you want to do. Or also, for instance, maybe you want this object to play a sound not when you grab it, but when it like falls on the ground, right? When it interacts with the table, not with your hand. Also possible. And that's another thing that we can chat about. The thing that's universal to all of those, though, right? To all the different use cases is this stuff here, the audio source, and then knowing, what's your roll off. This is what we covered in the last video. Your roll off, what's your 3D setting? Do you want it to play on awake? Do you want it to loop? What type of sound is it? All of that will translate to different use cases. So hopefully this starts to give you some ideas of what's possible. And I'm happy to go down different paths with you, depending upon what your individual projects demand, because at this point you guys are all doing very different things, and that's good. So let me know if you have questions. Happy to chat, and I'll see you all later. Bye.